Президент еще раз повторить, что Россия – это очень важный партнер для Африки. Говорят, что друг познается в беде, и как раз в сложные времена Россия всегда была рядом с Африкой.
This is my video update from Moscow, Russia on this Thursday afternoon, July the 27th. Let's talk about some news. And I'm just hanging out here actually on a street corner on a very busy intersection here in Moscow. And right across the street from me is an Irish pub. And so I figured that this would be a good spot to do a quick video and talk about what is going on in the world today. And the story that I was talking about yesterday, an update on the Hunter Biden story, is that his sweetheart plea deal that he was betting on looks like it's not going to happen. So Hunter Biden and his lawyers, they went into court yesterday and they were expecting a really nice plea deal with like full immunity and all kinds of benefits and protection. And it looks like the judge was having none of it. And now it leaves the Hunter Biden legal team with a bit of a predicament. They have to work on a new plea deal. So they have to try and negotiate a whole new plea deal that the judge will find acceptable. Or this thing may go to trial and they have 30 days to figure this out. Could you imagine if this goes to trial as Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son, runs for re-election? An interesting development. Not good for Joe Biden, not good for Hunter Biden, and a very interesting turn of events that took place yesterday. I imagine that they're going to figure out some sort of a deal. That would be my hunch, that they do figure it out and they avoid a very embarrassing trial. But still, it didn't work out as smoothly as the Biden, DOJ, and Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were hoping for. So that's just a quick update on that story. Let's now get to the main story of the day, which is a New York Times article, which came out yesterday. And this NYT article has the title, "Main Thrust of Ukraine's Offensive May Be Underway, According to U.S. Officials." Ukraine's main offensive continues, U.S. officials say. After holding back many of its Western-trained and armed units, Ukraine is now bringing them into action, officials have said, but it remains unclear whether a full-scale offensive is taking place. On condition of anonymity, officials at the White House and the Pentagon said they were watching the increased activity with great interest. Ukrainian officials told them that the new operation, if successful, would last 1 to 3 weeks. And one senior official at the Biden White House said that this offensive is going to be a serious test. This is the real deal as to whether the Ukraine military can succeed in their big counteroffensive, an offensive that offends me and offends you and offends everyone here in this busy intersection in downtown Moscow. But the basic summary of this New York Times article, the basic reporting, is that everything that we've been seeing for the past 3 months is not really the big counteroffensive. What it really is just a way for the Ukraine military to soften Russia up so that they can get to the point where they launch the real counteroffensive. So what took place yesterday and what's taking place right now is the real big counteroffensive. What we've been seeing over the previous 2 months was the the softening up counteroffensive. That's what the New York Times is reporting. And this actually does coincide with a statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which said that yesterday the Ukraine military, they did launch very big attacks in the southern direction, in the Zaporozhye, Kherson direction. Russian military repels massive Ukrainian offensive, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Russian troops have stopped an intensive effort by the Ukraine military to break their defensive lines near the village of Orekov in Russia's Zaporozhye region. The village and its surroundings have been the scene of fierce fighting for weeks as Ukraine's floundering counteroffensive drags on. Kiev's forces resumed intensive offensive operations just south of Orekov on Wednesday morning, the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that evening, despite the Ukrainians launching a massive assault with 3 battalions backed by tanks. Russia's 810th Marine Brigade and the 71st Motorized Rifle Regiment and the 42nd Motorized Rifle Division held their positions and repelled the Ukraine advance, the ministry said. During the battle, Ukraine lost 22 tanks, 10 infantry fighting vehicles, and more than 100 men, according to the ministry. So the whole strategy of Ukraine has kind of come back full circle to where they were on June the 4th, which is trying to launch a massive breakthrough in this Zaporozhye, Orekov direction. Rabatino, Orekov, Zaporozhye, Kherson. This is what they started off the big counteroffensive with on June 4th. They suffered catastrophic losses. Tons of Leopard tanks burned, tons of Bradleys burned, tons of Ukraine military were annihilated. And then they tried to change their approach. There was a lot of blame game going on and a lot of excuses being made over the past month and a half. And now they've come full circle to doing the same thing that they were doing on June 4th. They're doing it now on July 27th, which is to launch a massive push in this direction. The New York Times article, it says that the main goal of this real big counteroffensive is for Ukraine to break through the Russian defensive lines, reach the Sea of Azov, and then to begin to pressure Crimea and force the Russian government into some sort of capitulation. We've come full circle. After 2 months, we've now come back to the beginning as far as Ukraine's military strategy is concerned. And the failure of this push yesterday has actually led the Washington Post to put out a couple of statements today saying that, according to their sources in the White House, this wasn't really the big counteroffensive push. So the New York Times, according to their sources, they're saying this is the real counteroffensive. This is the real deal. It failed yesterday. The Russian military, they repelled the attacks. 22 tanks lost, hundreds of soldiers annihilated. And this morning, the Washington Post comes up with their statement, citing their sources, saying that this wasn't the real counteroffensive. This was more probing activity. The coordination between the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Pentagon, NATO, and the Elensky regime is pretty interesting to follow, I have to admit. The Washington Post, they came out with an article saying, a briefing, Ukraine live briefing, Kiev gains some ground in the south. Sweden accuses Kremlin of smear campaign. So this is the Washington Post's walk back of the failed offensive that was launched yesterday by the Ukraine military in the Orekov, Rabatino direction. And the Washington Post, in this walk back article, where they say, Ukraine in the south, they gained some territory, 10 meters here, 20 meters there, but nothing really happened of significance. They then go on to say that the Kremlin is smearing Sweden as they try to enter NATO with the whole Quran burning incident. They're actually blaming Russia for the Quran burning incident. Unbelievable stuff. Anyway, that's what's going on with the big counteroffensive. That's the latest update on the big counteroffensive. The New York Times was expecting the big breakthrough. They didn't get it, and the Washington Post had to provide cover for the Pentagon, the Biden White House, NATO, and the Elensky regime, and to come out with a statement saying that the New York Times was a little off in their reporting, and this is not really the big counteroffensive. So we have another big story to talk about connected to the conflict in Ukraine, and that has to do with the appointment of Victoria Nuland as the second in command at the U.S. State Department. Victoria Nuland is taking over Wendy Sherman's position. She is now the Deputy Secretary of State, reporting directly to Anthony Blinken, which really tells you a lot about the Biden White House and how after a year and a half of losing in Ukraine and being embarrassed by Russia in Ukraine, the Biden White House, the collective West, they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on their escalation strategy in Ukraine, completely captured by the neocons. Well, Biden is a neocon. He's been a neocon for 50 years. And so he's going to follow the neocon strategy of escalation in Russia, because that is what Victoria Nuland is going to push for. That is what she's going to bring to the table. This is very bad news for Ukraine. Victoria Nuland is absolutely committed to destroying Ukraine if it means that she can get some sort of regime change in Russia. That is her goal, regime change in Moscow. And it's really bad news for the European Union, because this is F the EU Nuland. It means that Victoria Nuland is not only going to destroy Ukraine, she's not only going to stay committed to trying to find a way to get regime change in Russia, but she's going to continue to destroy the European Union as well. She despises Russia, she despises Ukraine, she despises the European Union. And I did a video with Alexander on this topic on the Duran channel, which will go up today. And Alexander even said that there are rumors, just rumors, but there are rumors that the big counteroffensive plan is completely under the control of Victoria Nuland. There are actually people, and these are rumors, there are people in the State Department, in the Biden White House, who actually say that this big counteroffensive is called the Vicky Nuland counteroffensive, the Nuland plan. That's what they actually call this counteroffensive strategy. So this is not good news for the conflict in Ukraine, and it's not good news for the European Union. But it does really show you how the Biden White House is looking at all of this and what they plan to do going forward. More escalation, even if it means that the collective West is going to continue to get demilitarized and degraded and humiliated by this Ukraine project, which is exactly what is happening to the collective West. But there is no reverse gear. It also kind of signals that the Biden White House is not going to go so hard on China either, because Nuland is not so committed to the Taiwan project. She's full on board with Project Ukraine. Wendy Sherman was more oriented towards escalation with China. Victoria Nuland is much more committed to Project Ukraine, and she's not so interested in escalation with China. So, God help us. God help us. Victoria Nuland is now the second in command at the State Department. Incompetence and failure in DC gets you promoted. It gets you promoted. That's just the bottom line. So let's do two more stories, and we'll do a clown world. I'm not sure if this is a clown world story that I'm going to talk about, but I'll call it a clown world. And let's talk about how the SBU official, the SBU head of Ukraine, yesterday he took credit, took responsibility for the Kerch Bridge attack. I think he was talking about the first Kerch Bridge strike. He was at a ceremony for postage stamps, and he came out and said that the SBU was indeed behind the attack on the bridge in Crimea, the first one that happened, when was it, 4 or 5 months ago? He said, and I quote, "The destruction of the Crimean bridge is one of our realizations. I am convinced that the unique special operations carried out by the SBU will give stories for new postal stamps." His name, this SBU head's name is Maliuk, Vasily Maliuk, who is the head of the SBU, Ukraine's main intelligence and security agency. So the SBU is taking credit for the attack on the Kerch Bridge. You heard it from the head of the SBU himself at a postage stamp ceremony. They really are fixated on postage stamps, the Elensky government. What's up with that? What's this obsession with postage stamps? And we also have the story that Elensky is asking the Ukraine parliament to extend martial law for another 90-day period, which would mean that the great democracy known as Ukraine, the great democracy that Meloni was shouting about just yesterday in her viral video in the Italian parliament, that great democracy is going to cancel elections with the passage of a martial law extension. So I thought that was interesting news coming from the Elensky regime. The democracy that the collective West is always talking up is going to cancel the democratic elections that are scheduled for, I believe, the 29th of October. So I think I can make today's video a brief video, a short video. I don't think I have any more stories to cover. Let me do a quick check. For the clown world, we'll talk about Farage. I think that's an interesting story. Clown world on NatWest, because the NatWest CEO, what's her name? Allison Rhodes. She resigned, which is code for was forced to resign. She was fired, but they call it resignation because of the debanking of Nigel Farage. And she wasn't upset. NatWest, the board of directors, the UK government, which from what I understand, according to what Alexander has told me, has something like a 38% stake in NatWest, so it is partially owned by the UK government. All these people, including the NatWest CEO, they're not upset about the fact that they debanked someone, they tried to prevent someone's freedom of speech, someone's freedom to bank, and freedom to live and function in society. That's not what really upset them. What really upset them is that they got caught. That's what upset them. So good on Farage. He is really embarrassing the UK government. He is really embarrassing the UK banking system. NatWest is a huge bank. We're not talking about a small bank either. And NatWest owns Coutts. So that's why this all funnels up to the NatWest CEO. But clown world on NatWest. Shame on NatWest. Shame on the board of directors of NatWest. Shame on the UK government that goes along with this debanking hidden policy. I want to say it's a secret policy, but obviously the banking elites, the government elite, and the media, like the BBC, they're all in collusion with one another to debank people that they believe are saying things that are not acceptable. And they're perfectly fine with that. They're perfectly fine with shutting people down and shutting down their ability to bank until they get caught. When they get caught, well, then they have to throw someone under the bus, and in this instance, it's the NatWest CEO. She'll land on her feet. Believe me, she will land on her feet, and she'll get some cushy job. 6 months from now, they'll put her in hiding for 6 months, and then in 6 months they'll give her some job somewhere for her obedience, for her loyalty to the globalist system. Anyway, I think I can wrap up this video there. There were a lot of strikes yesterday in Ukraine. They actually even hit Snake Island, the Russian military, from what I understand. But they launched a pretty extensive missile and drone strike throughout Ukraine. And from what I understand, the target was the airfields in Ukraine. They are annihilating and demolishing whatever airfields are left in Ukraine. So that was a big story yesterday, which I didn't have time to report on during my yesterday update. So let's take a little bit of a walk if you guys want to stick with me for like 2-3 minutes. We're on Ulica. Let me see here if you guys can see it. Ulica Bakrovka. You can see it right there. That's where we are. And this is actually one of my favorite streets in Moscow. It's a nice street. Further down, you have a lot of shops and cafes. It's just a nice place to hang out and walk and grab a coffee and just kind of chill out in the city center. And if you actually take this street, like if you go all the way down, let me turn the camera here. If you go all the way straight down, you eventually get to Lubyanka, and you eventually get to the Red Square. It's about maybe like a 25-minute walk. So it's a good area. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. Go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. That's all for me on this Thursday afternoon. Let's walk a little bit more and I'll sign out. The exchange, the ruble dollar, ruble euro exchange.